I'm from the village of Zekfa, more commonly known as San Fernando. I currently live in Ventura, which originally was the village of Shisholo. A little bit about my family background. As your teacher was saying, my tribal ancestry, my Chumash and Tataviam ancestry comes from my father's side of the family. My ancestors were brought to the San Fernando mission starting in 1799. So for the last 6 generations, my family on my father's side has lived in and near San Fernando. I was born in San Fernando. The younger generation, my younger brother, younger cousins, my kids, we started moving around and were born in various other parts of the state. The 2 villages, Tuapu and Chigoyanga. Tuapu is a Ventureño Chumash village, and Chigoyanga is a Tataviam village. It's actually Magic Mountain is built over the village of Chigoyanga. It's right by the Santa Clara River as you are in Santa Clarita and the Highway 126. One thing I want to talk about is I've learned over the years that after the 4th grade, you don't study or learn that much about any tribes, let alone California tribes. So let me ask you guys a few questions. The Chumash are one of the oldest tribes in North America. How many thousands of years have we been here? Anyone have a guess? Or does anyone know?
I was gonna say 100,000 years, maybe?
Less.
Maybe 50,000?
Less. So I'm going to take that as that would be one of the things you would learn in 3rd grade, possibly in 4th grade when you're studying the mission period. And after that, you don't study native tribes, California tribes anymore. The Chumash are one of the oldest tribes in North America. We've been here 13,000 years. And we base that number, 13,000 years, on the human remains of a Chumash man that were found on Santa Rosa Island in 1959. He's known as the Arlington Spring Man. And the Arlington Spring Man is actually just the leg bone that goes from the hip to the knee and from the knee to the ankle. So the 2 long leg bones. They were found sticking out of a kind of a bluff along a creek on Santa Rosa Island, where they knew that there were a lot of very old ancient Chumash village sites. When they did the carbon dating testing on that leg bone, which not only have I seen, I actually was able to touch it. It's at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. The carbon dating testing determined that that leg bone was between 13,000 to 13,500 years old. And as of today, it is still the oldest human remains found in North America. They're starting to come up with older dates on sites, but they haven't found any older human remains older than that. But they're finding village sites throughout North and South America where they're finding bones of animals that were hunted by tribal people, arrowheads, spear points, and things like that. And they're able to do carbon dating testing on them. And some of them are 15, 16, 17,000 years old, which means the tribal people in both North and South America have probably been here before that ice age. The theory of we came over that land bridge over the Bering Straits up in Alaska when it became a solid landmass, and the ice melted enough whereas it was wide enough for us to travel. Excuse me for 1 second.
So thank you, Rick. So in the meanwhile, make sure that you're taking some mental notes or maybe even writing something down so that you can ask questions when we open it up for discussion. Okay.
Yes, and please, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat, and I can kind of see them and be prepared to answer when I stop here in about another 10 minutes. So anyway, they're finding sites that are extremely old. So how tribal people got here is a fascinating study. And if any of you plan on being archaeologists or anthropologists, it's truly incredible, and they're making major discoveries and things that will change how long people have been in North and South America as we speak. Of their analysis of ancient village sites is something that's really fascinating. So that's how long the Chumash have been here. My Tataviam ancestries, and let's put this in perspective. America is less than 300 years old. The Tataviam are considered to be a young tribe. We're about 3,000 years old. So there's a couple theories. Most people believe the theory that the Tataviam people that are from the Santa Clarita Valley, San Fernando Valley, going north in the mountains around up to Gorman and out towards Lancaster and Palmdale, that we've been there about 3,000 years. What's happened in California that I've learned over the years is we've had about 3 or 4 great droughts that lasted for over 20 years. And when there was these great droughts, the last one was about 1,000 years ago, tribal people in California would move around. So the tribal people that were living up in the mountains came down into the valleys. The tribal people that live in the desert, some of them started coming into the mountains and into the valleys. So about 3,000 years ago, they believed there was a great drought, and that's one of the theories. It's the theory that I believe that makes the most sense, because I hate the desert. I hate going through the desert. And one of the theories is my ancestors were from the Serrano tribe, which is out in the desert, east of the San Fernando Valley, east of the Santa Clarita Valley, going out towards Palmdale, Lancaster, and that area out in there, a little bit farther east, out into the desert. The Morongo, where the Morongo Casino is, the Morongo people are Serrano. In our language, what little we know about it, our language is pretty much lost, the Tataviam language, because we were a very small tribe. And one theory is that we were Serrano. During one of those great droughts, some of the Serrano people came and started villages in the Santa Clarita Valley, where it's more lush, more plants, more animals, and started small villages there. The Tataviam is a big tribe, large territory. It goes from Malibu in the south all the way to Ventura, Santa Barbara, Lompoc, Santa Maria, up to about Paso Robles. Inland, 50, 60 miles into the mountains from the coast, but most of our villages were along the ocean. They believe at European contact, just before the mission started, there was 20,000 Chumash people. At best, there might have been 2,000 Tataviam, probably less, probably more, about 1,000 to 1,500. So the Tataviam are a very small tribe. This is what I tell every group I speak to. It doesn't matter if they're preschoolers, middle school, high school, college students, senior centers. It bothers me that there's only 2 words used to describe most California tribes, including the 3 tribes in Southern California, the Chumash, Tataviam, Tongva Gabrielino. The 2 words are hunters and gatherers. We are hunters and gatherers. To me, it's just not enough. We were much more than that. We had a very complex culture and society. We had religious leaders. We built ocean canoes. The Tumol was mentioned in my opening. This is a Tumol. a plank canoe. They're ocean canoes. We use them to go out to the islands. You can see the planks on that one. So each one of those black lines is where the board is glued and tied to the board below it. So they're to build canoes. We are master craftsmen, master canoe builders, and paddled up and down the coast, out into the ocean, to the islands on a regular basis. We were a very complex society. So to say that we were just hunters and gatherers, to me, is an insult. So I always say the Chumash, the Tataviam, the Gabrielino Tonga Indians from Los Angeles are hunters, gatherers, and business people. We were entrepreneurs, and we've been entrepreneurs for thousands and thousands of years. And we have dozens and dozens of examples of that. And I'll give you a few. Abalone was abundant 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. They're able to carbon date abalone shells. And they have found abalone shells that are 12, 13, 15,000 years old. They last a long time. And they find abalone shells in the San Joaquin Valley, in village sites there where the Yoka peoples live. They find abalone shells in Serrano tribes out in the desert. There's no abalone in the San Joaquin Valley. There's no abalone in the desert. Those were traded there. In every Chumash village along the coast, from Morro Bay, Santa Barbara, Ventura, Port Hueneme, Oxnard, down to Malibu, every Chumash village, you will find obsidian. Obsidian is a glass-like stone. You can get a sharper edge with it, a sharper point than anything in the world, sharper than the finest stainless steel. So it's very valuable. You find them in every village in Chumash territory. Yet, there is no obsidian naturally in that Chumash territory or on any of our islands. You have to go out to the desert, out by Ridgecrest, Mojave, going towards Mammoth, Big Bear, Lone Pine. That's where there is obsidian. When you go out to those village sites, you find abalone. We trade it. We had business relationships. You find elk bones and elk antlers in Chumash and Tataviam village sites. We had no elk here. The elk were in the San Joaquin Valley. They were called Tule elk. The largest herds of Tule elk were around what we now call Bakersfield. And Chumash and Tataviam would go there to hunt the elk. So let me ask you a question before we ask you one last question. And you'll know the answer to these two questions. If all of us jumped in a truck right now and drove down to Mexico, crossed the border, jumped out of the truck, and started hunting deer, could we do that? Someone give me a yes or no.
No.
I see a head shaking. Thank you. We would need permission from the Mexican government. We would need permits. We would need a visa to get across the border. We would need hunting permits. If we jumped in that same truck and drove north for over 1,000 miles into Canada, could we jump out of that truck and start tapping maple trees to get maple syrup?
No.
No, same thing. We need visas. We need permission from the Canadian government. In order for Chumash hunters, in order for Tataviam hunters to go into the San Joaquin Valley, we needed the permission. We had a business relationship. We had diplomatic relationship with the Yokuts. The Yokut tribes are in the San Joaquin Valley. They go all the way from Bakersfield up to Sacramento. They were one of the largest tribes in California, territory-wise. They had millions and millions of acres of marshland. That was their tribal territory in the San Joaquin Valley. So that's why I say the Chumash, the Tataviam, almost all tribes in California are hunters, gatherers, and business people. And we've been business people, entrepreneurs. All the highways we drive on today are old Indian trails. So Shishalope, the village that we now call Ventura, was a major trade center. Tribal people from over 100 miles would come to Shishalope and stay for weeks and weeks, sometimes over a month, and trade things that they had in abundance for things that the tribal people here had in abundance. And when you look at where Ventura is, Highway 33 goes to Ojai, all the ways into the San Joaquin Valley. Highway 126 goes right along the Santa Clara River. All rivers were highways. We would make Tule Reed canoes and come down the Santa Clara River and the Ventura River that both come into Ventura. Highway 101, Highway 118, those are all old Indian trails. They all come to Ventura. So and if you noticed, I said we are hunters, gatherers, and business people. I had my own construction business when I was younger, and I do my hunting and gathering at Vaughn's and Trader Joe's. I hope to see some of you there. Little advice, don't go into the meat section and don't spear a tri-tip sandwich or a tri-tip steak. They will get angry with you. I tried it. So let's get some questions. How did I do in the 15 minutes? Pretty good?
That's great. It's perfect.
When you were saying about Magic Mountain, is it like built on top of the mission? I'm not sure it's a mission or just the area where the tribe is.
If you go to Magic Mountain, if you notice just a little bit north of Magic Mountain, there's a river, the Santa Clara River. And many of the Tataviam villages were along the Santa Clara River. There are about a good, at least 7 or 8 that we know of, and probably more. So what we believe is when you go to Magic Mountain, a little bit behind Magic Mountain, but what technically would be north of where all the rides are, there's 2 large parking lots for employees.
Yeah.
Those parking lots are built over the village site.
Wow, that's sad. Like
It's gone. It's pretty much destroyed. Yeah.
And they have the right to do that, to like build on top of that. They don't really ask for permission. They just do it.
Today, no. There would be all kinds of hearings because now there's laws that protect. It's called NAGPRA, and it's part of the Environmental Protection Act that protects sites like that. So they would have to negotiate, either build around it, go around it, or not build at all. Actually, parking lots and parks, lots of times, are the way that we negotiate out. We'll say, why don't you, it's called topping off. If there's a village site there, we'll go, why don't you make that a park and come in and bring in clean soil and put 6 feet of soil, then put your park. So all the plants, all the irrigation lines are in the first 3 feet of the soil, and the site is protected. But if possible, yeah, we try and stop it. But those laws have only been in effect since about the late 1980s.
Have they tried to get their land back? Like, say, if you guys want to fight for it back, have you guys tried, or?
It's almost impossible. But we actually just started my Tataviam tribe. We're a federally non-recognized tribe, so that'll be in the second part. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we just started last year a land conservancy. So we started the Tataviam Land Conservancy. It's a nonprofit, and basically what it is, it's a Native American Sierra Club. It's a Native American Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy. We are trying to acquire or get landowners to donate land that they haven't built on yet, that is still in its natural no buildings or limited buildings, and we'll manage it and keep it as a nature preserve. We got our first 65 acres donated to us last month.
That's amazing.
So we hope that that's just the beginning of thousands of acres that we can acquire, and all the land we will acquire, we will keep as open space. for people to hike and for tribal people to go out and collect the native plants and for us to do ceremony on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
I have a question for all of you students, because the original plan was to send you off into breakout rooms to discuss what you just learned. Do you feel you need to do that, or do you want to stay here and go ahead and ask questions about every 15 minutes? So we could, either way, we're going to take a break about every 15 minutes, and that break can be for you to go to breakout rooms and discuss in small group, or we can stay here and just do a quick Q&A question and answer after the 15 minutes. What do you all want to do? Stay here. I see a stay here, stay here. Okay, we're going to stay here. So that means you got to keep the discussion going for the next maybe minute or two before we go into another 15 minutes. So does anyone have any other comments or questions for Alan about what he just spoke about?
I was actually curious about like the native diet, like what they would eat, since they were among the sea. Like, was fish like a main component?
The Chumash live mostly off the ocean, and one thing that I've learned recently within the last 3 or 4 years that I never thought of, I said we find large abalone shells in ancient village sites when we're working around them all the time, and abalone was just beyond our imagination as far as how much there used to be. Literally millions of abalone on the islands and along our coast. And abalone get to be about that big. So they get even bigger than this. This one's about maybe 8 inches from here to here, and about 6 inches from there to there. This would have over 1 pound of meat in it. And they get even bigger than that. So they provide a lot of meat, and they're easy to collect. They don't run away and hide. But we were tremendous fishermen. For the first 10,000 years that we were here, there was an abundance of smaller fish. And in the last 3,000 years, a lot of larger fish bones started showing up in our trash heaps. Swordfish, shark, and dolphin. There's not much whale, so they don't believe we hunted whales. The Tataviam were inland, and the acorns in the Chumash boat, also acorn and acorn meal, because you can store it and keep it for a long time. So acorns and acorn meal. When you pound acorns, you have to wash that powder, that flour, that paste that you get 5 to 8 times. Wash it, let it dry, wash it, let it dry, and it washes all the tannic acid. It won't kill you, but if you don't, the tannic acid will give you make you you're sick to the stomach. You'll throw up. So you have to. It takes a lot of processing, but once you do, it's like a flour, like corn flour, corn meal, wheat flour, and you can store it for the winter. So both Chumash and Tataviam, a lot of acorn. The Tataviam, being that they're closer to the desert, and the yucca are abundant. Yucca is edible. The flowers are delicious. If you're ever out in the spring and you see those flowers on the yucca, pick some and eat them. They're really good. Have a very mild, kind of sweet-like taste. But you can eat them fresh. You can pound them, make a flour, and save them for later. But acorn roots are edible. And then we ate more of the animals that were inland. We ate and hunted a lot of deer. So the Tataviam were master hunters at hunting deer and things like that. So those are just some of the animals. Most California Indians, the American settlers, when they came, they thought we were savages. And one of the derogatory terms they used to describe us was digger. And as you know, digger rhymes with another word, and it's because we dug up a lot of roots. Yucca root is edible. Brodeo roots are edible. There's dozens and dozens of roots that are edible. There are dozens and dozens of roots of plants that were used for medicine to make teas from. So we were constantly digging up roots and plants, which thinned out the native plant population. So we never had the great fires that we have today. The reason we're having all these tremendous large fires is we're not harvesting the natural resources the way my ancestors used to do. Great question, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Alan, about the fires. I did see someone else, another Native sister, who was posting about that and about how plants aren't being harvested the way that they should be. We're not taking care of the land in the way that we should be, and that we should really, or the state, I should say, should really be working with Native Americans from the area that do have knowledge, hold knowledge as to how to take care of the land so that we can prevent these fires. And so that's a really interesting conversation that should be taking place. So I appreciate that you brought that up. But yeah, go ahead and continue for the next, for your next segment, and then we'll take another pause with questions.
Okay. And before I leave the fire thing, if you want to Google Brodea or blue dicks are, the scientific name is Brodea. And Brodea is a plant that grows after fire. So the brush, coastal sagebrush, coyote brush, yerba buena, yerba santa, they're brush. That's what's burning right now, the brush, the plants that grow 4, 5, 6 feet wide, 4 or 5 feet tall, and are thick. It's just a thick thing of brush. We would go in and burn 4 or 5 acres, 10, 15, 20 acres of it, control it, like this is burn this little area right here. And when that would burn down, the plant then that would allow for the Brodea to come back up. The root is about garlic size, about 2-3 inches in diameter, and has a nutty flavor. I've had it before. It's delicious. So let me talk about what happened to all California Indians. I was mentioning numbers, that the Tataviam's a small tribe, Chumash was a large tribe, territory and numbers. They estimate that just prior to the start of the missions, which was in 1769, there were approximately 300,000. Some people think a little bit more, that it might have been more like 400,000, but there was, most people agree that there was at least 300,000 tribal people throughout all of California. By the end of the mission period, so the mission period started in 1769 with the first mission, by the 1800s, most of the missions were built. From 1800 to 1840, half of the native population died. The Catholic Church today still says that most California Indians that died during the mission period died from diseases, chickenpox, measles, diseases that they say our immune system was not strong enough to fight off, that we'd never been exposed to those diseases. That's true. We'd never had measles or chickenpox prior to the Spanish and English and Russian and European people coming to California. But we were an extremely strong and hardy people. We would paddle our canoes up and down the coast from the mainland out to the islands on a regular basis. You have to be very strong and knowledgeable to navigate those ocean waters in a 20-foot, 30-foot, 40-foot canoe. I know because I've done it. It's extremely difficult. We would send our runners, our messengers, 50 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles. They would travel those distances in one day lots of times, 100 miles. That's how great our runners were, to get messages to other villages, to find out what their acorn production was like. Maybe ours trees weren't producing very much, so we'd send runners 50, 60, 70, 80 miles away to find out with the other villages how they were doing, and then negotiate trade deals with them. So our runners had to be great runners, had to speak several languages. The Chumash speak their own language. Tataviam speak their own language. Gabrielino Tongva speak a different language. So if you were a tribal person 500 years ago, you usually spoke 3-4 languages, at least enough to make some trades and barter and deal. So we were a hardy people. What the church doesn't say today is that they worked us to death. They worked us so hard that our immune systems were weakened. That's why measles could wipe out thousands and thousands of us. That's why chickenpox could wipe out thousands and thousands of us. And I'll just use their own numbers. My family was brought to the San Fernando Mission. In 1810, the San Fernando Mission was at its peak. They had 13,000 head of cattle. The 800 workers that they had to take care of 13,000 head of cattle. That would keep 800 workers busy. But they also had 8,000 sheep. They had pigs. They didn't give the numbers of how many pigs. They had chickens for eggs. They didn't give the numbers of that, but they had to have hundreds, if not thousands, of chickens. They had 2,700 horses. So just take the large livestock. That's over 20,000 head of livestock, cattle, sheep, and horses. They had free range. That means they went all over. So that means our Indian cowboys had to get on horses and herd for miles and miles and make sure that the wolves and the bears and the mountain lions weren't killing off the cattle and the sheep. It was a lot of work. We made everything. Our women made all the clothes. Our women made all the shoes. So we tanned all the hides to make the leather for those shoes. We made all the food. We grew all the crops. We fed everyone at the mission, not only those 800 workers, the other 200 that were kids and the elderly that didn't work. We fed all the priests, all the nuns, all the soldiers, all the guests that came to San Fernando. We did all the cooking and cleaning. Our immune systems were weakened. That's why our population dropped from 300,000 to 150,000. Our population was cut in half in about 50 to 60 years. After California became a state, it got worse. How many of you know about the bounty system? If you know about the bounty system in California, raise your hand. I do. Anyone else? The bounty system. When California became a state in 1850, they estimate there was 140,000. I forgot to tell you, this will be on the test. No, I'm just kidding. There were 140,000 California tribal people throughout all of California in 1850. When California became a state, our very first governor, Governor Burnett, proclaimed he was going to exterminate all California Indians. He felt it was easier just to kill us. They considered us savages and subhuman. So they said that to justify the slaughter and murder of California Indians. So he did two things to accomplish that goal, and he almost accomplished his goal of exterminating all California Indians. From 1850 to 1873, the population dropped from 140 to at least 20,000, probably more like 15, maybe even as low as 12,000. By 1873, the population was less than 20,000. They did it two ways. They got millions of dollars from the US government to hire and establish the California Militia. The California Militia had one job: to kill and hunt California Indians. They were one of the highest paid militias, cavalries in all of the United States at the time. So what you have to stop and realize is there were over 100,000 people came from the East Coast to California in 1848 to look for gold. Most of them didn't find gold. So now there's an abundance of young men looking for work. The governor realized that. and he got several $1 million to pay these men to hunt Indians. There were over 300, over 300 Indian massacres in California. Most of them done by the California militia. Many of them, some of them done by vigilante and private vigilante groups. The private vigilante groups that did the massacres also would go out and hunt California Indian like we were deer. It was hunting season. If they killed the California Indian, they would receive a bounty. If you just brought in the scalp of an Indian, killed them and scalped them, you got a small bounty, $2 to $5. If you killed the California Indian and chopped off his or her head, including babies, which was very common, you got $10 to $20. Over $100,000 was paid out in bounties. So do the math. The militia, between the militia and vigilante bounty groups, they almost exterminated all California Indians. My tribe went from about 1,500 to 2,000 to less than 100. Then you throw on top that California, I have to give them credit. They were creative. So they came up with a bounty system. They used words like, they're going to exterminate the Indian problem, like we were a problem. We were the workforce. We were the farm laborers. We were the ranch hands. We were the Indian vaqueros. We were the Indian cowboys. We panned most of the gold. We were the workers. When the settlers came out, they were told that all California Indians are savages. All California Indians are very warlike, and all California Indians are cannibals. We were none of the three. We were hunters and gatherers and what?
Entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Yes.
And like I said, when they came out, they realized that they're not warlike at all. They're not savages. They're actually the workers. But still, they almost exterminated us. Then, this was a brilliant move. California passed a law called the Indian Protection Act. It sounds like an act, a law, a bill to protect my ancestors. It was a law allowing all California citizens, all U.S. citizens that came out to California, and I try and keep above using labels because I don't like being labeled. So the early settlers, those of European ancestry that came out to California, they were allowed to buy or just go out and claim just about any tribal person in California they wanted to. And they could do that by saying, if it was an adult, that they were indigent. So basically, if an Indian looked like he or she couldn't take care of themselves, they didn't have a home, and were by today's standards look kind of homeless, any U.S. citizen can claim that tribal person as their indentured servant. They didn't want to use the word slave. You could also buy children from those families that were indigent, and that child, that little boy or little girl, would be your indentured servant, would have to live with you at your ranch, your farm, until they turned 18. So they took the young kids and used them as farm laborers and ranch hands. And since we had zero legal rights, even when they turned 18, they still were usually forced to work. In 1850 and 1860, up until 1865, when the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, and they also said you can't sell Indian kids anymore in California. But up to that point, from 1850 to 1865, you could have gone to downtown Los Angeles and bought Indian kids for $2, $5, $10. And if they could prove in court, which was very easy to do because we weren't allowed to testify. If I lived, what would that be, 150 years ago, 170 years ago in 1850, I could not testify in court because I was an Indian. I couldn't even testify as a witness to help a California citizen. So if I saw someone steal someone's horse and I knew who it was, I'm an Indian, I couldn't testify in court. But like I said, we also couldn't testify to say, no, I'm working for at the Garcia family in San Fernando. So they pretty much enslaved us or killed us from 1850 to 1873. So let me give you an example of how this affected, how far I have to go back. That gentleman right there, that is Antonio Maria Ortega. He's my great-grandfather. He was born in 1855, died in the 1930s. I forget which year, but 1935, 37, somewhere around in there. Lived a long life. But he was born in 1855. The bounty system went to 1873. Someone could have killed my great-grandfather and they would have been paid for it. They would not have been sent to jail or to prison. My great-grandfather. Some of you might be fortunate enough that your great-grandparents are still alive. Stop and think about that. Your great-grandparents, if they had lived 150 years ago, would have had a bounty on their head in California if they had brown skin. And anyone that had brown skin was endangered of being killed. So if you were a poor Mexican worker and you came to California thinking you're going to work and weren't aware of the bounties, they would kill you and cut off your brown head and get a bounty for it. So there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of Mexican people that were killed that came from Mexico in California in the 1850s and 60s and 70s. It was an awful time in California. How am I doing on time, Veronica?
Yeah, let's take a couple of questions or comments from folks who haven't shared yet. And I have a question myself, just because I'm really big on trying to get my students to a point where they can see the agency that they have within themselves to really analyze and think critically about the material that we're covering, but then also through their agency, how they can address the issues that we're talking about. So maybe this question, or maybe you can answer this towards the end, but what I really want to address is, what are the biggest issues that Native Americans and local Native Americans are dealing with today, and what would be your call to action? What do you feel would be the most impactful yet doable thing that the students that are present here today can do to address this, or to help even in whatever small or big way that they can?
I feel like they need to teach us in elementary school from K to 12, the history, the actual history, and not sugarcoat everything. Saying, oh, Columbus came over here, discovered America, and everything was rainbows and sunshine. That was not rainbows and sunshine. That was
No.
Horrible. I can't even put any words. Like, I want to cry because the pain and a genocide like that. Just imagine if my family was during that time of me, I would have been killed. And it's heartbreaking, and that's real, and that wasn't that long ago. And that's the realistic side of it. It wasn't that long ago. Just like how slaves, how they were hunted down as well. That wasn't that long ago. That's the reality. And the call to action is to change that and to never have that happen again. And to tell people and to tell children the real truth. See, I'm like, it's really upsetting. I'm sorry, but yeah.
No.
Thank you for sharing yourself in that way. Thank you for being authentic in this very real conversation.
Yes, thank you very much.
So I don't know if you answered this or not. So what would like Native Americans do if they knew they were going to get killed? Like, would they still be working, or would they just like go and hide somewhere?
There's a great book. It's called American Genocide. It's by Dr. Benjamin Madley. It's a tough read because it documents a lot of those massacres. So some people think that the numbers in Dr. Madley's book are much higher because he's just going on documented numbers. Because the Indian people were murdered and slaughtered, they went into hiding. So if there were survivors that witnessed some massacres, we think the numbers are higher. So there's some famous massacres in Northern California, and the estimates range from 100 to 300. I always go with the higher number because they're just going by the number that either the local newspaper reported or that the vigilantes or the militia said, oh yeah, it was only about 100 Indians. And they didn't want to admit that they went in and killed babies and infants and small children. Yeah, we basically went into hiding. In Southern California, where there were more missions and we were more of the labor force, there weren't as many massacres and killings. We were enslaved. So that picture of my great-grandfather, we're pretty sure he was an indentured servant as a young man because he had some land taken away from him by Charles Maclay. And Charles Maclay was one of the early founders of San Fernando. And he took 8 Indian men to court because they were farming land that was given to them by the San Fernando mission priest. And he claimed that they couldn't legally own land and that they had the land illegally and had the court fine them $500 each. And my great-grandfather at that time was a young man, about 20 years old. And we're pretty sure through family stories and what we read about court records that he had to work off that $500 debt. He didn't have $500. So he was an indentured servant. He had to work off that debt to Charles Maclay. You would think he would have had to work it off to the city of San Fernando, but no, that's part of Charles Maclay's genius. He got the land and workers having to work for him for 2-3 years. American Genocide is a tough read, but it's something that I recommend. To the young lady that mentioned how the true history has been sugar-coated, thank you for that. I went from elementary school, from kindergarten to high school, and this is what I learned about tribal history in California. They didn't even discuss this. Then in the 70s and 80s, they started teaching a little bit about California history. And even today, the reason I jumped at this opportunity to speak to you guys is I can have this discussion about massacres, about tribal people being murdered. I can't have this discussion with 4th graders. In California curriculum, 3rd and 4th grade is where you learn about local tribes. I can't have these discussions with 3rd and 4th graders. All I can say is the priests and the missions and the soldiers were very mean. That's about all I can say to 3rd and 4th graders. The priests and soldiers were very mean to the Indians. I can't talk about rape and murder and people having their heads chopped off for $5, $10. It's difficult to hear, difficult, but you guys are old enough to hear these things. It's getting better, and I hope, knock on wood. That's an old saying. I think in the next few years, the California curriculum for high school will add a component of Native American history, California Indian history, so we can have these discussions. And third and fourth graders will just learn about the tribes and how they survived when they were tribal and lived off the land.
There's actually something that they're trying to implement. I just read about it. It's called the 1619 Project. And
Yeah.
that's about African Americans during that time. But I think they should push for Native Americans as well, because that's something that's crucial of American history. And I kind of compared it like the slave trade and the bounty hunters. I kind of compared it to similarities, because during the slave trade, they had people literally would hunt the slaves down if they were trying to run away.
Yeah.
And that's like a similarity that I kind of just brought together. I'm like, wow, that's like the same thing that they did to you or to your people and to my people.
Yeah.
And it's the same ways. And then they call other countries like horrible, but then they don't realize what we did too.
We're kind of hypocritical. Any other questions from any of the other students here, please?
Alan, I do have a request, but for those of you that do have questions or comments, please jump in, and I just don't want to forget. If you could please speak to the coming down of statues in the Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley, and Ventura area, because those are all recent, and what was going through your head when all of that was happening? Why was that important? And what does that mean for the tribal peoples now? And then I know that in the areas that I mentioned, you know, they weren't statues of Christopher Columbus, but they were more so statues of Junipero Serra, who is a saint in the eyes of, officially in the eyes of the Catholic Church. And so what was that? Why was it important for those statues to come down and to understand the indigenous perspective? But if others have other questions, please, he can answer that after.
Let me give you a little background. I say this all the time. I'll figure something out, and then when I present my case, lots of times I'll say, you know, I went to Bakersfield Junior College. That's it. 2 years of college. And the last time I checked, Bakersfield Junior College is not in the top 100 institutions of higher learning in America. It's just a community college. That's all the education I have. And then I'll say that as I preference with, but I was able to figure out this injustice, this or that. And one of the best compliments I ever got, other than, you're a good looking man. You guys laughed way too fast on that one. One of the best compliments I ever got was I was living in Bakersfield, California. We moved to Bakersfield when I was in junior high. My dad was in construction, and there was a lot of construction work there. And I went to junior high, high school, and a couple years of college. And when I was in my 30s, I went to a lot of planning commission meetings, board of supervisor meetings, and city council meetings to address Native American issues. And I'm on my way to a planning commission meeting, I believe, could have been Parks and Rec, because we were meeting a lot with Parks and Rec department about some new parks that they were proposing to build in Bakersfield. And I get into this elevator, and I'm going to go up to the 4th floor in the county building in downtown Bakersfield. And on the elevator is my high school government teacher. And I loved my high school government teacher, Mr. Quiring. And Mr. Quiring was one of my favorite teachers. He really was approachable, and you could tell he really enjoyed teaching and brought an enthusiasm to it. And it was one of my favorite subjects. My senior year, I took high school government, or government, U.S. government. And we exchanged pleasantries. Good to see you. Good to see you, Alan. He goes, he says, I use you as an example in my current government classes all the time. And I was kind of taken back. I go, really? Because I was a little bit of a troublemaker when I was in high school. And I'm thinking most teachers use me as an example of this is what you shouldn't do. But he goes, yeah, he goes, I've seen your name in newspaper articles. I've seen you being interviewed on the local TV about this tribal issue and that tribal issue, and getting some parks named after tribal local tribes and things like that, protecting ancient village sites. He goes, and I tell my students that this is one of my former students, and he is making a change, working within the government, working within, going to meetings. There was about a 3-year period that I never missed a planning commission meeting or a board of supervisor meeting in Kern County. I went to every one of them because there was a lot of proposed developments. And what you were talking about, building over, can we protect? Could you change and protect? That's what I was going to those meetings for. This was in the early 1990s, and they just came up with all these laws to protect ancient village sites and ancient burial sites and things like that. So I was working with the various local government agencies and developers to protect them. And it made me so proud that my old high school student used me as an example of someone that's involved in a positive way with their government. And I've learned a few lessons that we need all different types of people and use all different types of methods. Ernie Galvez, that's the cutest dog. Oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Thank you. He's a pup.
What's his name? Her name.
Well, it's short for Speedy Gonzalez. But.
All right, I like that. I'll share why I like that name in the later Q&A. But I learned that we need all different types of people to make positive change, whether it's city, county, state, national, just within our family. We need all different types of approaches. We need the warriors that go out there and protest and get in people's face. We need the people that work behind the scenes. And one thing I learned is it's kind of nice to see myself on television on the evening news. Local Tataviam elder speaks out about the removal of Father Sarah's statues. Yeah, it's for my ego to be on TV talking about why we should remove a statue of Father Sarah. If I really want to be effective, I wait until those meetings end, and then I go one-on-one and talk to the Padre. I go, Padre, how can we resolve this? When I'm able to talk one-on-one with the city council members, one-on-one with the mayor, that's when at least I'm my most effective. I can make eye contact, ask how the kids are, how's your family, how are you surviving during this pandemic? Having council meetings, that's most effective. And I've been involved with the removal of 3 Father Sarah statues, and they were all removed in different ways. So I was involved when they removed the Father Sarah statue in downtown Los Angeles. And I actually was there, and I didn't have anything to do with tying the ropes around it and pulling it down. The young people did that. But I saw the reaction of the people. And I knew that it was part of the healing, that putting those ties and physically pulling it down, and some of them were angry, some of them were crying, some of them went over and put flowers on the statue or around the statue. Some of them, like myself, burned some sage and said some prayers. So there was all different types of emotion. I believed it was necessary for the healing process. That trauma that I talked about earlier, of being labeled inferior. The Padres, the soldiers, they thought we were inferior. I think my people have pretty much proved we're not. We've survived some horrific times, and we're still here. We contribute positively to the culture. I'm very proud that a local private school is going to be putting a plaque at their school for Indigenous Peoples Day next month, a plaque acknowledging the California Native peoples that lost their lives during the mission period, the bounty period, and the California tribal people that lost their lives in all the wars and conflicts in America, that have served proudly in all branches of the armed services. Like my father. My father was a Marine and fought proudly in World War II because he loves this land. And to me, those people that pulled that down, that was part of a healing process. They weren't thugs, as our president says. They weren't rioters. They were people that had been abused and neglected and not listened to for hundreds of years. I was involved with the removal of the Father Sarah statue in Ventura, where tribal leaders like Julie Tuamite, Eleanor Fishbarn, and various other tribal people met with the Padre in Ventura, with the mayor and council members, and people like your teacher, myself, wrote letters, and I communicated with the mayor, several emails back and forth addressing the concerns and why I wanted that statue removed. So it was peacefully, and let me make a point, and then I'll open it for questions and answers. I mentioned earlier that I don't like labels. As we know and as we've learned in this time, this is a really unique time. And if we're going to survive this, it's not going to be good because of old people like me. Old people like me are the problem. Your generation, the young people that are 15, 16, 17, 18, you are going to solve this problem. And you will make this whole world and America a better place. But I've come to realize that words are powerful, labels are powerful. So someone way smarter than me said, this is an African American woman. She was saying, my ancestors, my grandparents, my great grandparents, they were not slaves. My people were not slaves. My people, we were not slaves. We were enslaved. We were forced to work without pay. We were forced to give up our culture, our life way. We were forced to do those things. We were not slaves. We were enslaved. I did not want any Father Sarah statue removed. It's part of our California history. It's part of the Catholic Church history. I want them moved. I don't believe a statue of a religious figure should be in front of City Hall of Ventura. There's a separation of church and state. That statue should be moved. If you were to ask me, and what I suggested to the Padre, what I suggested to the Mayor of Ventura, is that statue should be moved to the Mission. That statue should be moved to the Ventura Museum and then the true history told of Father Sarah. So words are powerful. Those people that were saying, we want those people want that statue removed. No, I want it moved. Get rid of the RE. I just want it moved. I don't want it removed. I want it moved somewhere else. And I'll finish with a story. And I apologize if I've gone a little bit over my 15 minutes here. I helped organize the summer solstice ceremony up at Mount Pine, 50, 60 miles north of us here and a little bit east. It's the highest mountain in our territory. It's up by Fraser Park. It's the sacred mountains where the Kedinumuk, the Yokits, went for ceremony, and it's a sacred mountain. And I helped organize a summer solstice prayer circle up there for the last 25 years. And about 10 years ago, I was getting ready for summer solstice, and I was up there prayer circle ready for everyone that was going to come. And there's a large parking lot towards the top of Mount Pinos, and I was parked in the parking. We're going to have our prayer circle, and this gentleman walks up to me and he looks at me up and down, and he goes, "Are you an Indian?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "What tribe?" I go, "I'm Chumash and Tataviam." And he says with a straight face, in fact, he even pointed, he goes, "I heard the Chumash are cannibals." I go, "No, we're not." He goes, "No, you guys were cannibals. I heard you were cannibals." I go, "No, there's no historical accounts of Chumash people being cannibals." "No, I heard you guys were cannibals. Really, you were cannibals." I go, "No, I know some of the top anthropologists, and they've never mentioned we were cannibals. That's not true." And I couldn't convince him. So finally, I walked up to him and I squeezed the back of his arm. I go, tasty. And he got pissed and walked away. Remember when I said the early settlers? In Dr. Madley's book, it says the early settlers from the East Coast were told that all California Indians are savages, very warlike, and cannibals. That was in 1850. In 2010, a gentleman was telling me he heard we are cannibals. When you put a label on people, it takes a long time to remove that label. The label I want to put on you guys, I'm impressed with your heart and your soul, your honesty. You're well-informed young people, and I'm old enough that I have seen decades and decades. For 50 years, I've worked with young people. So I've seen 5, 6 generations of young people. Your group of young people are the most well-informed group of young people I have ever worked with. Kudos to you. Thank you so much. Now some questions. Give me some ice water, but I can hear your questions.
All right, folks. So for those of you who have not shared your voice yet, we have about 2 minutes. So if you have a comment or a question, now's the time. I highly encourage you to please ask away, because you have actually 1 more minute to do that. So even if he's not on the screen, go ahead and ask your question. He can hear you.
I can hear.
I think it's important that we share more Native American history through the school system, because we need to learn about that in order for society to gain empathy, and so that we don't have all these bad traces from our history, because if people aren't educated, they're going to keep on using stereotypes. Like, people don't understand how important these stereotypes are. Like, it just shows that if young kids learn it just once, they're gonna open their mind to the history.
I had a comment. So when all the like the saint, the father Sarah, I forgot, I don't remember his name, happening, like I was like, why are they gonna remove it if he's like a saint there? But now that I like listen to the story, and now I see why they want to move it. Like at first I really thought, because like everyone was sharing it on Facebook, and they were saying like these people want to like to get rid of it and all that. But now that I know that you guys just wanted it to get moved and like know the actual story why, because of all what they did to like the Chumash tribe and everything. So now I get the story. Now I see your guys' point as well.
And to say about like social media and how you're saying that we're very educated, it's all thanks to the social media aspect, because we're drawn into everything that we see, and it's quick and we could see it, and anything can be posted and anything can go viral and everyone's going to be aware of it. And I believe that removing and moving the statues to a different location was probably the best thing that's been happening for us. It's been healing a lot of people. And you can, how you're saying about people are angry and then sad and then some are laying flowers, like it's all the point of just healing and moving together as a country to be better. And that's the thing that I love about that, because there's no hate. It's just coming to a conclusion and drawing a new story, a new path.
Thank you for your words. We are out of time, Alan. I don't know if you want to give a quick goodbye, last statement, but we're actually out of time for this session, and then we'll reconnect for the next session in about 10 minutes.
This is my tribe. You can see that. Bernardino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians.
Oh. Thank you for sharing that. Everyone, can you please give Alan a thank you and a heartfelt goodbye, very heartfelt thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.